Good afternoon. Welcome to EDFO 625 Group 5's podcast, Vodcast, whatever you want to call it. Hello, everybody. How you doing?
Good. How are you?
Doing great. Excited to be here. Today we've got, we've got introductions going, but I'll just start off and just say Andre wasn't able to be here for the meeting. Wasn't able to get lined up on time there, but he was part of the group and had some input on questions 5 and 6. So didn't want to leave him hanging out to dry. But Dan, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name's Dan Keelish. I spent 5 years at Union County High School. Recently, just got hired at Lawrence North High School, so just moved over to Indianapolis and getting ready to head on another journey.
Exciting. Anthony?
Yeah, I'm Anthony Moyman, and I've taught for 7 years at Jacksonville Junior Senior High School in Osgood, Indiana. So a really small school. I teach engineering classes. Pretty excited about what the future holds.
Oh, I should pick your brain a little bit. Engineering. My name is Ryan Parrott. I am this is my 10th year in education. This is my first year as an assistant principal at Royalton Elementary here in Muncie, Indiana. Before that, I taught in Marion Community Schools with a very different group than the rural county kids I'm working with today. And then before that, I worked with some at-risk kids at a residential youth facility. So I've didn't take the typical path to education, but I think the stuff that I've done in the past has really helped form my philosophy on education on a lot of things. I said that about engineering, Anthony, because in the last 3 years, I've started a robotics program in the elementary programs here for Delta, and it's just become an instant. It's something that calls to me, and something, I've done baseball coaching before. This robotics coaching stuff is spot on.
Oh yeah, it's a lot of fun. We have a middle school team.
Awesome.
I
think it's great because it's got all the tropes of like normal sports, and then with the team building and the collaboration and the winning and losing and planning, but then it also has that real world side effect of giving you skills that you're going to need for a living.
Oh yeah, for sure. To go along with that, our high school has competes in the Rube Goldberg competition every year.
Oh, thing through Purdue?
Well, it's similar. It's actually through the whole country, and we've actually placed in the top 3 in the last 2 years. So,
well, that's fantastic.
We're doing all right.
You got to give yourself a pat on the back for something like that with your input.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
Yep.
All right, I know that's way off track, but that's how things go. We have 6 questions we're going to talk about today with neoliberalism. We're going to start right away with the very first one, which basically says, since the years of the publication, and the publication we're talking about is the book, The Life and Death of the Great American Public School. Did I get that right? Yeah.
The death and life of the Great American School System. Very close.
I was almost there. So since publication of that book, which I believe is 2010, what else has happened in terms of neoliberal influence in public schooling? Provide examples from your research. Does anybody want to start, or you want me to go, or? I'll just tell you what I found. Basically, neoliberalism hasn't necessarily stopped. The Ravage sort of turns her tail in the middle of the book, and that was sort of my biggest complaint in the whole entire book, is she's telling us about all these things that are bad that's happening, but she was in a position to actually make change when it was happening. She just didn't see it. But the great privatization of school continues to move forward in Indiana as much as anywhere else. So a couple things I pulled out was, first, for anybody that's watching this that isn't involved in the EDFO 621 class, congratulations. But neoliberalism is essentially the privatization of schools. It's the idea of bringing free market practices and capitalism practices into what is a government entity. It happens within police departments and fire departments for a long time before it really started moving into schools. One of the things that I thought was interesting is you see all these tales from the 1980s of small cities privatizing their fire departments, and then the private companies that take over the fire departments go belly up. And in that time, they've sold all their fire trucks, they fired all their original firefighters, and then when the private company goes belly up, the town is left with zero fire protection because that company takes their fire trucks that they bought with them, that takes their employees and unemploys them. And I thought it was really interesting because I think this could be that should be a warning call for people in education, because that's essentially what we're doing is we're giving all this the public control to these private companies that if they make poor decisions, which they seem to be doing so, we're going to be left with no public school infrastructure, just like we talked earlier in the year with Louisiana or New Orleans, and then there's a city in Kansas, right? Kansas City is moving that direction.
Yep.
And basically, the state of our current federal government is all the proof we need that this is continuing to go. DeVos, which is our current head of education at the national level, he's probably the biggest outspoken supporter of charter schools and privatization of education, and to give that to somebody in the highest position, which we can debate whether or not the federal education is actually that important. It is, because there's a lot of money, but I mean, historically, education system's left to the states. We continue to give more and more influence to the federal government, but so to put her in that position really shows us that the influence is not going to wane anytime soon. And then even here in Indiana, we recently had a change to our PGP programs. If you guys experienced that at all this summer?
Yep.
Where the Department of Education is now requiring us to go out and get real work, quote unquote, real workforce sort of experience that has to do with our communities. They're trying to basically push schools more and more into the workplace, which I don't necessarily think is a bad thing, but to tie that to what is a professional license, I think is a bit of an issue. I mean, it's basically equating that teachers who can learn from other people, but must learn from people in the profit sector in order to do their job correctly, I think is a bit of a slap in the face. I think we need to continue to fight for teachers' rights and not marginalize their skill set. Does that make sense?
I completely agree. And I agree with you. I don't think the movement's going to stop. I saw an article, Schools Out, from the Washington Post, and they're predicting about 40% of American students could be taught by charter schools by the year 2035. So that's just kind of scary to me. And like you said, a lot depends on who we have in those positions of power and what their feelings are on the issue.
I would hope, honestly, that this eventually all starts to fall on its face. I mean, they're not seeing the gains that they want. And I don't want to jump on what I'm going to talk about later, I guess, for the next 10 years. But I just that would be my goal. But I think that's a naive sort of goal when you consider that even in a school system like my own, which I'm fortunate at this point to be in a pretty successful school district. But to be in that district and have people question whether or not we should be moving students to, you guys may have been really low. I don't know. We'll see if it worked, but moving kids to consolidate into larger schools, even though research shows that that's not necessarily the best way to do that. But to do that just because it's going to save money, I think is where we come to the issue with neoliberalism in the first place. It's not kids first; it's money first.
Right. Yeah. No, the school I teach at, that's a constant debate. We are a very small school. We have about 60 kids per grade, and but it's just a different feel. I mean, you get to know all of the students. I completely agree. It shouldn't be about the money. It should be about what's best for the students.
Yeah, I completely agree. The school I just left, Union County High School down in Liberty, Indiana, has the county in and of itself has a lot of money issues that is directing the school district there. And there's just came out down there that Union County may cease to be a county because they're going broke down there and not really able to handle everything. So that's obviously going to impact the school district, and it's going to get absorbed into another county relatively close down there. And then where I just got hired at Lawrence North High School, speaking on the money side, in my first week of being hired, some of my bosses were talking about they're trying to get a plan in the next 10 years to consolidate Lawrence North and Lawrence Central into one high school. And that's really a money-driven idea from everything that I've been told about it in my short time hired there. So everything is just money driving this situation instead of actually doing what's best for students.
Because you have the money issue, and then you also have the testing and accountability issue that all this influence sort of has created. In Marion community schools, originally they pulled all the fifth graders out of the school and made one intermediate school, put all the fifth and sixth graders in the same building. And one of the mitigating factors of that is to consolidate kids to save money at that issue. But one of the unintended consequences that has sort of helped them with that is they realized that when they had all their kids in one group, their testing groups have balanced out. You don't have one school that it's just more lower income that has more and more need dragging down the testing data of that particular school. You put all the kids in the same school, and your growth data sort of neutralizes. You get a district-wide look instead of these individual schools. It's worked so well that I'm assuming this isn't private conversation that somebody was sharing with me, but they're actually looking at consolidating even the fourth graders, bringing the fourth graders up into the intermediate building, and that way in their individual elementary schools, which they currently, I think, in Marion Community Schools have 4, they'll have zero growth data to pull from those buildings. So they'll have to rely on other data to give those schools their grades, which historically K2 buildings always get graded really, really well. So I'm assuming K3 buildings would be the same, because you would all be dependent on just your iRead test, which is a second grade level test in third grade, and then one grade with no test, with no growth data, versus iLearn data. So you're creating situations where there were sort of unintended, in my opinion, we're reinforcing bad decisions of consolidation when it comes to knowing your kids and having those relationships and those cultures by these weird testing situations, which are allowing that data to balance out. But that's a little off topic of what we're talking here. So I'll go ahead and jump over to question 2. You guys ready?
Sounds good.
So question 2 says, has any one/thing/organization spoken up against the neoliberal wave? If so, what has to be done? What have then done? What I'm assuming that what has been done is what I should have put there. Sorry about that, guys. If not, should something be done? So I looked a little bit at this. This question is just sort of to find out who exactly is leading the charge, because I think by reading the book, we all know who's leading the charge for, and based on the question we just had, or the conversation we had in question 1, we know that the budgets and something that could be leading us for sort of the neoliberal wave. But so I was really trying to find something to speak out against, and the largest group is the teachers, of course.
For sure. And the teacher unions.
And it all comes to me. It's that whole, are we putting kids first? Are we able to do our jobs as teachers? Are we able to do our jobs in education in the current environment and climate? And teachers unions are saying no. I put a little graph here. I pulled this from Education Week Analysis, which is, I don't know, a website that I was looking at, but this shows the number of teacher strikes that have occurred since 2010, the day of the publication of the book. And you don't see a whole lot. I don't know if you guys can see my mouse cursor on the screen or whatever, but you don't see a whole lot there in the first 3 years through 2013, and then you see a pretty massive spike. And then obviously last year you had a huge strike, and then even on top of that, this year alone, let me see, I've lost that on the other screen. Go back to it. 33,000 teachers struck for the first time in 33 years in Southern California. That is the LA Teachers Union. So that is pretty impressive. That I think if we could extrapolate this or take this even 1 year further, we're going to have more teachers strike. We're going to have more teacher dissatisfaction. Now, I went into the reason why a lot of these teachers struck, because it wasn't like say no to neoliberal wave. But a lot of it had to do with, obviously, the symptoms that we're seeing with this particular type of reform. Emphasis on test scores, larger class sizes, increased teacher accountability, sort of the all the side effects, all the side effects that we're seeing from this particular movement in education was their complaints. The other one was healthcare, but healthcare is being hit with a lot of the same neoliberal wave that education is. Profit first. So that means insurance rates are going up and pay is staying down. So I think that's a pretty loud signal that something isn't working right, but it's just not a signal that's being heeded by anybody.
Yeah, and the research I did on this, writers Jennifer Gale-Sachs, Sarah Bugnovitz, and Frances Mahoney Mosdale echo the same you're talking about, with the educators and teachers unions really being the driving force to stand up against essentially what's become the professionalization of teaching and what educators can do with the mass firings that I read about through the research and that you saw a little bit of in Ravitch's book and things like that. That's kind of leading the way. But as far as seeing things that are currently trying to be done against it, I just didn't run across anything that really stood out to me of things that maybe at the grassroots level or some other level being started to come up against it. I don't know if you guys were able to find anything on that part of it.
I did. I actually found an article from December of 2018 in the Chicago Times, and it was titled that the charter movement in the Windy City was in hot water and likely to get hotter. And it just pointed out the shaky or unreliable test scores. It's really a big mixed bag. Depends on the school. Not all the charter schools did very well. So that was pretty interesting to see. So I think some of those people are starting to see that it might not be the best option. And then I also found another one in the Washington Post that polled residents of Los Angeles, and they said that 75% of the residents that they polled actually favored improving the existing public schools over the charter school option. So I thought that was pretty interesting as well.
One of the things that I did for this particular question is I just went to Amazon and I just looked at the current books under the search heading Education Reform. And I found it was pretty interesting because the first 5 books were Poisoned by Politics, The Big Lies of School Reform, Addicted to School Reform. Then there's just a weird textbook that I think I had at some point here in class, so maybe using my data against me. Letters to Young Education Reformers, President's School and the Public School. So and these all these books here have been written since 2015. 2014 is the oldest one of those books listed there under Amazon, which I thought was an interesting thing because if I'm looking at professional development in my career, one of the things I read a lot of books, and to see that that's sort of the tone that particular education reform is taking, it seems like at least authors are starting to speak up against why it's not working and providing maybe some guidance elsewhere. I mean, that's how neoliberalism all started in the 30s. I mean, it was an idea from an author that just continued to gain ground through the 80s until the world we live in now. So hopefully other good ideas are starting to percolate in there.
That is true. And I just wonder, with, as you mentioned before, with DeVos as the Secretary of Education, how this battle, to use that word loosely, is going to look going ahead. Obviously, with her being a champion for charter schools and voucher programs and things like that, versus what we're starting to see now from different writers and what the data is saying.
Well, don't steal my thunder. No, because I think the current climate hopefully will set up a scenario where we start to crawl out of this. But we can talk about that in a minute. You want to move on to question 3? Did we feel like we answered this one well enough?
Yep.
Okay, so in your opinion, is the current reform efforts a positive impact on American schooling, negative impact, or what change since you've experienced in your K-12 experience? So, and you can look at this 2 different ways. Like me as a student, how school has changed since I was in school, which I graduated in 98, so 20, 30 years ago, closer to 30 years ago than 20, I guess. It's or just since I've been a teacher for the last 10 years, or in education that way, it's challenging to me to look at it that way because I don't really have a lot of conception of personally where things are. My first year in education was the first year that Indiana started to switch to the current state of teacher accountability, and got rid of a lot of salary schedules and things like that. That 2011 law. So that was my first year in education, full time, as a contract teacher. It was interesting to me. I guess so I have that little parallel of where teachers were like, "Oh no, this is so bad from what used to be," but because I was working as a non-contract teacher for those first 2 years, I didn't have a contract to compare it to. So that's hard. That was kind of a hard question for me to answer. I do think it's a negative impact where we're at. I think I don't see a whole lot of positives. The number of good I guess impact, the amount of good impact or positive impact is really minute compared to the negative impact.
Mm-hmm. I would agree. I mean, I graduated high school in 2007. So my graduating class was the last one before they started changing the style of diplomas and and you had to actually say what diploma track you were going to go on and things like that in the state of Indiana. And I think as far as just the negative impact we see is, the cuts in teachers, administrators, schools, the arts, different activities like that, when we're solely focusing on test scores in specific subject areas, and then we don't truly get a well-rounded education and good base on when we're cutting things out from underneath them all the time compared to when we were students.
I will say that one of the things I did when I was looking at this question is I looked up that PISA. Here, I'll show you here. PISA, sort of, it's the national test that, or the international test that is administered, that sort of rates schools on how well we did in reading, or compared to Finland or Japan or whatever it was. It tests 15-year-olds, and so I couldn't get to 2018 data, which is what I really wanted, because I think it's the most relevant piece of data, because it's not done yet. But I was able to pull, if you look at the small square at the bottom, I think it's easier to understand than the giant table at the top. But the small square at the bottom basically pulled 3 points of data from just looked at U.S., because obviously we're doing all these things, right, to make these changes, to make our students and our country more competitive at the international level. So 2009, which would have been while the book was being written, but still I think at the early side of the wave of what we're seeing now, up through 2015. So this gives a good 6-year span worth of data, and I think this is out of Massachusetts. I think I just used the U.S., but I showed Massachusetts on the table. So and so I only pulled the levels 3 and 4, which to me is the on grade level kids, would be the bulk of our students. And what you see here is that the X at the top means there's been absolutely no significant difference. It has not gone up or gone down in any significant way. It has gone down a little bit. You look here at 2009 and compare it to the 2015, that first column, it has a difference of -2. So it actually went down 2 points since 2009. Am I reading that right? No, it went up 2 points. So we've gained 2 points since 2009 overall. 2012, it actually went down 4 points. So we have, a net difference of -2? Is that how that works? Anyway, either way, the X is what speaks loudest to me. We've done all of this work. We've moved all this effort and changed the focus of education in this country in the quote unquote pursuit of improving schools, and we've made zero difference, except we've cut the budgets and slashed teachers' way of life, and really, I liked what you said earlier, Dan, that deprofessionalized. We've made teachers less than stellar in the eyes of the general public for nothing.
Right, and I think that shows in the teacher shortages, and that's going to continue to be a problem. I think we'll get to that in the next question, question 4, but I think that's going to be a big issue in the next 10 years of education.
Well, let's
talk how teachers are treated.
Well, let's talk about it now. Let's hit
right.
Question 4 right now. What do you believe will happen in American public school in the next 10 years?
All right. Since we were just talking about, I'll start with the teacher shortage. I found a study titled "America's Teacher Shortage is a Bigger Problem Than They Thought," and it reported that in 2002 there were actually teachers looking for jobs. There were more teachers than there were jobs. By 2012, there was a 20,000 annual teacher shortage. And then by 2017 and 2018, it was 110,000 teacher positions that were unfilled. So, I mean, those numbers speak volumes. That same article goes on to predict that by 2025, that shortage is going to raise up to about 300,000 teachers each year that we're just not going to have. And I think the largest part of that is some of these things that are going on, some of the trends, some of the cuts. It's just, I mean, teachers have been underpaid for a long time compared to other, similarly educated workers, and it's catching up. It's catching up to us.
Oh, I agree. I have, this question is going to sound like it's out of left field, and for that I apologize. But I'm just curious. Do you guys have what do we call them? Learning days, e-learning days, at-home school days?
Yeah.
We do not.
I think that's just another side effect of this whole marginalization of teachers. If you wouldn't ask a doctor to just send home a packet on how to give yourself, an appendectomy at home, it basically it's removing the professional out of those days. It's saying that anybody can communicate this pedagogy to these kids regardless of what you're training or whatever it is, and we send home these things. And instead of working 180 days, we're working 178 because I guess teachers don't really need to work that much anyway. So I think that's just one more method that people are using to continue to marginalize what we're doing. So
Right.
I would like to think in the next 10 years that the topic of education continues to be political suicide. Ever since George Walker Bush, all the way back during the very first starts of the more recent education reform, nothing has changed. We saw that in the previous data. It's not making any difference. And hopefully the kids is something that every citizen in this country can continue to rally behind, is something that we care about. If we continue to show that more and more intrusion by politics isn't working, hopefully politicians will start to stay away from it as a debate topic. Let's send it back down to the states where it belongs. Let the states themselves sort of handle their own educational issues, and we'll and then our more national politicians will want to move away from the issue because they can't fix it. And if you look at the recent presidents that we've had that had the biggest impact on education, you're talking about former governors that did have a lot of impact on education, but they had impact in the education of their state. So what's happening in the state is not translating at a federal level, and that's where I think we get in a lot of our issues. So I would love to see education become a political suicide, and it just shifts back to the state, and all this stuff starts to revert itself. But I think that's a pipe dream, and I'm being really naive about it. Because as we continue to add more technology, it becomes easier and easier to privatize a lot of this stuff.
Yeah.
It does. But going back to those e-learning days, we know that the data shows that e-learning days and teaching online just doesn't work. We found an article that was sent out earlier to us in the year where students were 72 days behind in English on a 180-day schedule, and it also showed that they were 180 days behind regular students in math. So they basically didn't learn anything through the whole year. So it shows the importance of teachers in that sense, and it also just shows how that stuff just doesn't work.
Well, the irony is that we're all in an online class as we're having this debate.
Yeah, yeah.
But I think we're mature students. We're doing this out of value and out of choice, and we're going to get out of it what we put into it. That we're not fourth graders that need to be passively taught, which is what normally happens. So, I agree 100%, and I think it's interesting every time I see a school district near us. Hey, we're going to add 4 e-learning days, and then you can just watch it. I want to Facebook friends all those parents the very next day because it's immediately a tidal wave of, why do I have to sit at the table and teach this kid for 6 hours every day? Well, you wanted it. You didn't want to go to school in June, so they're trying to do what they should do. Yeah, I agree. I think I would love to see some changes. Unfortunately, I don't know that's going to go the right direction.
Yeah, I agree. I would love to see some changes kind of back to the state and out of the business-minded framework that we found ourselves in. If we focus so much, in my opinion, on the data, that's just driven us to this very narrow view of education and been one of the factors that's led us to where we're at. So it would be nice in the next 10 years to see us get back to the state level, but realistically in the next 10 years, we'll probably see an increasing influence of the data we're looking at on the high stakes testing, and probably, unfortunately, more charters and privatizations will probably try to be pushed down onto us.
So let's take this to a hypothetical situation. Let's say that what they want is capitalism in education, right? They want capitalism in education, capitalism in social work, capitalism in medical, which is probably the 3 areas that shouldn't be driven by the market, because we should be doing what's best for mankind. But that's what people want. That's what peanut counters want. What what if the three of us could go together and use all of our general knowledge and all of our skills and all of our proficiencies to put together a school which we could guarantee kids would have the quality education that they require to be successful adults? Could we charge for it? In question 5.
That's a good one.
I mean, if we're really good at teaching, and the funny thing is what I see in this a lot is homeschools. Have you guys follow much homeschool debate?
A little bit.
So a lot of successful homeschool parents, what they end up doing is they end up forming homeschool co-ops, right? So that you can consolidate your homeschool kids into these little groups, and they can all go to PE in one area, or have music taught by a music teacher, or have science taught by a science teacher that you pay to bring in. These are individual contractors typically who work for a homeschool co-op and are teaching basically for profit. It's a side gig. It's or how about the new big push for teacher part-time work? What are they called? V5 academies. The where you can teach Chinese kids online. Have you guys seen this at all?
No.
A lot of the teachers in my building have been doing it, and what they do is because they're on the opposite side of the globe, obviously different part of the day. You basically put your resume out there as a teacher that shows what you've done and what you're capable of doing and the hours that you're available onto this website. I should have looked this website up before we talked about it. I apologize, but then more affluent parents across the sea can then hire these teachers to tutor their students in sort of English education and our math and our reading to try to help their students be ahead. But teachers are making $20 an hour, $15 an hour doing this. They're using the exact same skills they use for our kids for quote unquote free, and they're doing it online in a situation that isn't the best way for kids to learn. We know that, but they're getting paid substantially for it. So that's a for-profit school. It's just an extension of the skills. And if we have teachers that work really, really well, the big push in a lot of state, if they're producing data, they get merit pay. So aren't we ethically or unethically just paying teachers for harder work or paying teachers for data that may or may not be right already?
That's interesting.
Sorry, I got a little deep, I guess.
It's
I got a little
tough.
That's good. That's interesting. I haven't thought of it in that way.
I think good teachers have a particular set of skills. They understand how to distribute data in a way that, or not data, they understand how to distribute information in a way that a student can go from concrete to abstract to owning it. They understand how to work through that process, and they also know how to keep kids engaged intrinsically, interested. And you wouldn't tell somebody who could lay twice as many bricks per hour than the next guy that he shouldn't get paid more. If you're good at what you're doing, you should get paid more. There should be value in the skill of teaching, and I think that's what we've talked a lot about in these questions is devaluing teachers themselves. I don't know. We turned away 42 kids this past year from being able to attend our school because we're currently overcrowded. If we was to take those kids, we'd be making more than what our community is actually able to handle. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But does that put us in a for-profit area? No, because we got to provide services for those kids. So is it ethical to turn them away? All right. Sorry, I'm rambling. But this is I think pretty much the debate. 5 and 6, which I'm flashing between the two. I'm answering probably more question 6 than I'm answering question 5 because I think they're one and the same. When we add for-profit to anything, it becomes a very different business model than just doing what's best for kids. And if our goal is to do what's best for kids and to create citizens, then we have to be nonprofit. We have to be investing every ounce that we earn back into the kids that we're servicing.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
Which is interesting that okay, so the guy that was running the Hope for Harlem or the Kids Safe Space, the Jeffrey, do you remember
Canada.
yeah, Jeffrey Canada. So
Yep.
we watched the videos and somebody brought up in the debate that he was making like $300,000 a year, right?
Yep.
And while they were talking, I was like Google searching what is the average pay of a superintendent in New York, and the average pay for a superintendent in New York is almost 200,000.
So it's not much more. And
So
he's in charge of the whole. And he's in charge of the whole company. I mean, he
and
put in the legwork.
and he's being successful at it.
Yeah.
So you have all these
Yeah.
other schools that he's having to pull from that are not currently being successful, and their bosses are still getting 180,000 to 200,000. Doesn't it make sense for him to get 300,000 if he's doing the job?
And if you look at that at a bigger spectrum outside of the education world, 300,000 a year for owning a company and running every component of it is not a lot of money.
Right.
So I think that's what makes these questions so difficult to answer.
Well, it comes back to any time a teacher asks for money. When anytime a teacher talks about having a livable wage, it's you got into it for the wrong reasons, then didn't you? Aren't you there for the
Right.
kids? I mean, you already have summers off. I'm doing air quotes. You can't see it. But I think there has to be a sign where we put our priority. We show with our money where our priorities lie, and start paying things that we care about. Schools, for me, is one of them.
Yep.
I feel like I went a whole entire 180 degrees where I started talking about how unethical it was, but then I gave examples.
And then you were talking.
how it's appropriate. So I don't know. I'll be honest. I don't know whether it's ethical or unethical.
Well, there's not a right or wrong answer. I don't know. That's what we need to find out in the next 10 years, isn't it?
Yeah, that's it. I did have one question though that I wrote in my notes here for this for-profit school or charter. Is that what is a private college a for-profit school? Like, there's lots of private colleges, even in here in Indiana, whether they're religious based or just smaller colleges, but they're private colleges that don't receive money from the state. They probably still run as a quote unquote nonprofit, right?
Yeah,
But so does the NFL, right?
that is true.
And I would never say the quotes of the NFL is a nonprofit, but it is a little bit strange when we throw those terms around. Okay, well, I don't really have anything else to talk about for questions 5 or 6. Did you guys have anything you wanted to add in beyond what I rambled about?
I think we covered it.
Yeah, I think you got it.
Any final thoughts?
I think just sum up what you guys just talked about there at the end is, it's a really hard thing to determine ethical versus unethical in, the situation that we're in and, what's the best step forward. Because, if you can look back at the time during different educational reforms and for whatever reasons they were pushed forward, people involved, I'm sure, thought those were in the best interest to get education where they wanted it to go. And then after so long, we realized, well, that might not have been a good idea. So it's just interesting to see where we're at now and to see if we can learn from what we've done in the past and actually take steps forward to do what's best for kids, because that's where we, as educators, always should keep coming back, do what's best for kids, and kind of everything else follows. And I think we've lost sight of that with some of the different things that have been passed and used over the last 10, 20, 30 years.
I agree.
Yep.
I can't anything else to that. Well, if Anthony, did you want to say anything else, or are you good?
I'm good. Good
All
job,
right.
guys.
Well, hey, thank you. Good job. I had a lot of fun. This is probably one of the things I've enjoyed the most about this class is the debates and then having this opportunity to talk with educators. Because if you're not in education, it's really hard to empathize or understand the problems that education are facing. So I appreciate it, and I hope Andre has an opportunity to add to this in a meaningful way that allows him to contribute. With that, I think I'll just close this out.
Sounds good.
All right.
Take it easy, guys.